Welcome to this week's episode of Drawing on Experience by Noname Porter-McShirley, produced by Riffle Publishing Incorporated. Hello everyone. In this episode I'm going to illustrate how I learned 5 terms in a foreign language using visualization and mental association. And while you watch, I'm going to talk about how meaningful I find these particular terms to be. I practice martial arts, and every time I test to rank up, part of the test is a little bit of Korean vocabulary that is pertinent to the actions we practice. Usually, we are learning the Korean words for types of kicks and other movements. But recently I had to learn a special set of words, the 5 Tenets of Taekwondo. So my thoughts are branching several ways here. I'm going to make a couple of side points, and then I'll get to these 5 tenets and why I want to share them with you. First, if Korean was a buzzword for you, please set aside politics for a few minutes, because whatever you believe about the current activities of a particular country has absolutely nothing to do with the value of an ancient technique that was developed in that country ages ago. Secondly, I believe it is a good requirement that we learn some Korean vocabulary along with the fighting techniques. It would be easier to do everything in our native English, but having to use a little bit of the language of the source country does several things. It expands our thinking internationally. It reminds us of and helps us to respect the fact that good things come from many parts of the world. It can easily prompt the curious-minded student to learn the history surrounding the development of our martial art, and learning from history is always good. And finally, whenever we might meet Korean masters of Taekwondo, then knowing Korean terminology for what we practice allows us to better interact with them and show respect for them, both as masters of the art and as descendants of the source country of that art which we have chosen to practice. Now, back to the 5 terms I had to learn in Korean. They are referred to as the 5 tenets. That's not to be confused with tenants. Tenant, T-E-N-A-N-T, is a person occupying a place, like the person who pays rent to live in a house without owning the house. The other word, tenet, T-E-N-E-T, is defined in the dictionary as a principle, belief, or doctrine generally held to be true, especially one held in common by members of an organization, movement, or profession. So, here are the 5 tenets of Taekwondo in English. Courtesy, integrity, perseverance, self-control, indomitable spirit. Some of those things sound easy until you start looking deeper and wider for how they should apply in everyday life. Courtesy is probably the easiest. Being courteous includes being pleasant, polite, kind, helpful, and respectful. You help pass the food around the table before you start eating. You offer to help carry something when you see someone with too many things in their arms. You might use yes ma'am and yes sir when communicating with those who are older or have more authority. At the grocery store or gas station, you hold the door open to let someone else enter before you hurry in. At a red light, when someone is waiting in a driveway, you hold back a few feet to let them turn onto the road ahead of you. But do you also watch the vehicles in your rear-viewing mirror and scoot up a few feet to allow them to squeeze into the turn lane? Do you suspend judgment of a rude coworker, allowing that they might have had a string of irritating problems before they got to you? Sure, you try to avoid interrupting someone talking, but do you actually listen and try to understand what they want to communicate and their feelings behind what they're saying. Here's something that happened to me the other evening, which shows complete lack of courtesy. My son and I walked into a fast food place kind of late at night. I walked past 3 employees behind the counter so I could see which drinks were available on the drink dispenser. One employee said, "Our lobby is closed." My son asked if their drive-thru was still open. Yes, it was. So even though they had failed to lock their doors on time, they wanted us to turn around, get back in our car, and wait 5th in line. All we wanted was a couple of drinks. The courteous thing would have been for the teenaged employee to rush over and lock the doors so that no one else entered, while saying something like, "I was supposed to lock those 5 minutes ago, but since you are in here now, what can I get for you?" But how many well-behaved children do you see these days? And who is teaching your children to think in a courteous manner? Let's look at integrity, which is second on the list of Taekwondo tenets. First thoughts for this word are don't lie or cheat, and be sure to keep your promises. But what about things you say you will do, even without explicitly saying that you promise to do them? Instead of saying, "I will do that tomorrow," you could change the way you communicate to remove the sense of making a commitment you might not be able or happy to keep. For example, you could say, "I intend to do that tomorrow," or "I expect to," or "I hope I can," or "I probably will." Also, if you do commit to something that you find is not appropriate or possible, follow up by telling the other person, "I know I said I would do this today, but here's why I can't, and here's my new plan for getting it done." What about the little ordinary breaking of commitments, like creating a voicemail greeting that says if they leave a message you will return their call? But then when you get a message from someone you don't feel like dealing with, you never call them back. What about the little things that are ingrained in our culture as politeness, but that are in the gray area between honesty and dishonesty? For example, it's so common for someone to ask, "How are you?" or "You doing all right?" And most of us habitually reply with something like, "I'm good, how about you?" But all that is communicated is that you are both going to get along without biting each other's heads off. No real meaningful information was exchanged. Now, there are some people who would launch into a little passing rant about all the injustices and difficulties they are dealing with, and how they are about to blow their top. But for most of us, the truth lies somewhere in between. We are fine relative to desperately afflicted people somewhere, but we are usually not really happy or content because we are struggling with something. Struggling is fine. Life is a character-building exercise. Emotions have to be understood and tamed. Choices have to be pondered. Solutions have to be puzzled out. Some issues are too personal to share in detail. But if we always respond with a simple, "I'm good," then we are shutting down an opening for real conversation, which might prove helpful. Here are some good examples of more honest responses to the standard greeting of, "How are you?" Example 1. "I'm having a rough day, but I'll get through it." With this, you've just led your own thoughts closer to the light at the end of the tunnel, reminding yourself that things aren't as bad as they feel, reminding yourself to have hope, and reaching for happiness that is just around the corner. You also just reminded the other person that they aren't the only one struggling, and maybe their problems are small by comparison, which allows them to feel better about their own day. Example 2. You silently realize that you've been unnecessarily grumpy, so you push that attitude aside by looking for something positive, and respond with something like, "It was a beautiful drive in this morning, wasn't it? I'm hoping I can get outside on my lunch break." Or, "I had to wait on a train and barely made it to work on time, but I'm here, and did you know that trains are really green? They can move a ton of freight almost 500 miles on a single gallon of fuel." Example 3. "If I get one more day like today, I might quit." Sometimes all you can honestly see is negative, but that can allow the other person to offer help. They might be able to physically lighten your load or help you solve a problem, but even just a sympathetic and supportive comment back to you could lift your spirits. Struggles always feel lighter when we don't feel alone in them. I recently changed shifts at work, and when I ran into my old supervisor, he asked how I was doing. I shrugged and said, "They aren't as considerate about what department they put me in as you were." That complimented him for the effort and kindness he puts into his work as a supervisor, but it also opened up a whole conversation about how and why certain people do things. And in the conversation, we both learned positive things about each other we'd never known while working together. We both would have missed out if I'd simply said, "I'm fine," and walked away. Integrity is sticking to what is true and important. Truth is important because it is the reality we have to deal with. But there are a lot of aspects to reality, and we can choose which aspects are best to talk about. It would be irresponsible to blurt out the first thing that comes to mind every time someone asks you a question. But more honesty in the world would be a good thing indeed. The third tenet of Taekwondo is perseverance, which can be a tricky one. You don't want to tell your kids they can never quit anything. Trying lots of things provides valuable experience and can lead to discovering their life's calling, the thing that they are best suited to and that will make them happiest. Of course, no one has time to do everything at once, so we have to quit some things to make time for others. And it's often most productive to move on to some other endeavor when we realize that what we are doing is not a good fit for us. But what perseverance is all about is refusing the inclination to quit just because something is hard, and refusing to accept the notion that we can never do something good enough just because someone else makes it look easy. Everything is hard when first starting out, and can be hard for a long time if you want to be good at it. Learning a new skill takes focus, mental application, and physical practice. But you don't have to have these strengths to start. The teacher is not just to instruct in proper fighting technique, but also to make the learning experience a combination of fun, challenging, and rewarding, so that the students are compelled to keep working hard and becoming more capable, also becoming better people in the process. Taekwondo being a competitive sport as well as a self-defense tool, students naturally want to prove they can do what the other students can do, so perseverance grows organically. But courtesy dictates that even the students who don't naturally have a competitive spirit are not left behind. Every student is supposed to help lower-ranking students learn, practice, and become more capable. And the reward for helping each other is that teaching clarifies and reinforces what has been learned. The fourth tenet of Taekwondo is self-control. Self-control starts with the rule that fighting skills are never to be used for hurting siblings, or to bully anyone, or to start a fight. The skills should only be used to defend yourself or others. Self-control permeates every part of a student's time at Taekwondo school, if it is a good school. Food and drink must be kept away from the practice mats, which might mean controlling an impulse to chase another kid while having a snack between classes. Uniforms must be worn and kept clean, which can mean not playing in the dirt while waiting for a parent to drive them to class. Students must be polite, respectful, and focused, even when they feel tired or angry or frustrated. And physical self-control is emphasized, first in starting out slow and careful with new moves, so as not to hurt your training partner. But physical self-control is also part of the practice drills, as muscles are exercised in performing controlled and ever more precise movements. The fifth and last tenet of Taekwondo is Indomitable Spirit. This is a lot like perseverance, but here's one way to differentiate. I said perseverance is about not giving up because something is hard. You push on until you are successful at that activity or skill. But having an indomitable spirit means you don't give up who you are. You don't let someone break you into compliance. My Taekwondo master likens being indomitable to the grass that can be 10,000 times bent over by the wind, but always bounces back up. I read another master online describe having an indomitable spirit as going on with what you believe is right, even if you can't see how it will do any good. One place our society is seriously lacking this indomitable spirit is in the workplace, when the boss or the company culture inadvertently teaches employees that working harder or doing a better job will not earn rewards in the form of pay raise or job promotion or even a thank you. Too many employees give up their character and settle for doing sloppy work with a careless attitude. But a few people remain indomitable, persisting in doing good work whether anyone notices or not. This may appear fruitless, but you have to be the good that you want to see in the world, because you are the only person you can control. If everyone decides that they will be sloppy because everyone else proves sloppy is good enough, then sloppy is all that becomes available. When you go shopping, do you rummage for the item without defects, or are you happy to buy sloppy? When you continue to do what is right, even though others around you push you down for it, you can take satisfaction in standing strong and being a good addition to the world. So, if listening to me, you find you and your kids, if you have any, are already strong in these 5 tenets, that's awesome, and congratulations. Seriously, thank you. I want to summarize by saying, as in everything, there are some poor teachers and poor students. But in general, and in the good schools, we don't just learn how to compete as a sport or how to win a fight. Developing character is built into the process. We learn things that not only apply within the martial arts school, but are also expected to carry over to all parts of our lives. When multiple times per week you practice things like being courteous, confident, speaking up, listening, focusing, and persevering, these things become part of your habitual way of thinking and behaving, showing up in all sorts of situations. As a huge bonus, practicing martial arts is a great way to get your body into shape and make it stronger. So, if you happen to already be strong in any of these traits that are the Taekwondo tenets, you could still be an example and aid to other students while benefiting from physical and mental practice. But if you or your kids are struggling in any of these areas, you may find it quite helpful to find a good martial arts school. One last suggestion. If you enroll as a family, you will be demonstrating to your kids that adults can learn too. And if your ego can handle it, don't be afraid to let your kids get ahead of you. They'll love being able to teach you for a change and will be motivated to stay ahead of you instead of getting lazy. And here we are at the end of what I have to share for this week. So I hope you'll join me again next week for another drawing and a completely different story. Until then, check out my daily doodles that are only a minute long right here on the same channel. Thank you for watching, and I'd be honored if you chose to recommend this channel to a friend. Have a wonderful day, and I'll see you again soon.